Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for the Converge webinar this afternoon. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Val Fox and Jeff Wright from Bentley University, our presenters for today. Val Fox is the CMO at Bentley, and she oversees all communication initiatives. She's pioneered the adoption of content-driven inbound marketing as a director agency at Bentley University. She has 15 years of experience in creating digital platforms that engage customers and drive results. Prior to joining Bentley, Val was the director of digital at Forrester Research, where she led customer insights gathering and site design and development. We're also pleased to have Jeff Wright, who's the director of enrollment marketing at Bentley University, who works with undergraduate admissions to develop innovative student recruitment programs. After years of waiting by the mailbox for business reply cards to be returned, and watching click-through rates on traditional display ads plummet, he has fully embraced content marketing as the most efficient way to connect with prospective students. Before joining the world of higher ed, Jeff worked in public relations, focusing on consumer and high-tech projects. I am so excited to have both Val and Jeff here today. We had the opportunity to have them lead a keynote session at our conference in New Orleans on inbound marketing. Val and Jeff have both been pioneers in launching the inbound marketing efforts at Bentley. They have some phenomenal data to share and some great stories as well. I do hope that you'll enjoy this webinar, and I will now turn it over to Val and Jeff.
Anne, thank you so much for that introduction. It really was a fun, really tremendous event a couple of weeks ago, so thanks for having us back. Hope this means that we got some good reviews at the live event, and that we can live up to those expectations on today's webinar. So thanks to all of you who are listening in. I'm going to get us started, hand it over to Jeff, and then I'll wrap up on the Q&A side. So if you go to any conference today, and I think one of the themes you'll see at any marketing conference is everyone is trying to figure out the how do you operate in this landscape of paid, owned, earned media? It's a confusing one, to say the least, and I think in higher ed, we are also learning a lot, sharing a lot in regards to what each of our organizations are doing in that space. For us, we've spent a lot of time on the earned side with our PreparedU project, and we have leveraged that and used it as a springboard to move into inbound. And I want to walk you through all of that today. I think we're going to be completely transparent and share not only how we got our start in storytelling and adopted inbound, but we're going to peel back the curtain and be transparent about mistakes we made so that you don't have to, and then some hacks, tips, and ideas that may help you adopt some of these practices quickly. So,
Val, and oftentimes people ask the question, will we have these slides afterwards? And yes, we will provide the slides as well as the recording. So if there's anyone else on campus that you'd like to share this information with, you are welcome to do that.
Great. So with that, I'll get started. I promised just a few quick slides about Bentley, because this is all about content marketing and inbound today. But just as a backdrop, Bentley is a business university about 10 miles outside of Boston in Waltham, Massachusetts. And we're about 4,200 undergrad students, 1,400 grad students, single-cell business university, majors and minors that do span the liberal arts as well, though. And, of course, we wouldn't be a business university if we didn't stress careers and outcomes. Career services are a core tentpole of our offering and taken advantage of by our students in both undergrad and grad. So we always underscore our starting salaries, the internship take rates, and our placement rates as we perform really well there. So that's a little bit about us, and I will move right into the marketing part of the presentation. So we really got started with content marketing and inbound when we took another look at our brand circa 2011, which ironically sounds like ages ago now. But in the 2011 and 2012 timeframe, we redefined our brand. And for those of you who've gone through this exercise, you know that this is not an insignificant effort when you are working across an organization where there's a lot of collective input and governance is shared across many, many stakeholders. So we really went through all the, I guess I'd say, took a holistic approach working with Princeton Scarborough that surveyed, I believe it was 9 audiences, ranging from prospective students and their parents to recent alum, current students, students who had been out 10, 20, 30 years, business partners, faculty, staff, and from there, and I missed an audience. I think the other one was, peers at other institutions. So we got a sense for how they felt about Bentley and really use that to inform our messaging platform and the visual identity, and then went back to those audiences and tested a number of concepts and mood boards. And what we came away with was a new brand identity that at an institutional level is prepared. And we talk about preparing for success in both life and career. So we look at it holistically. It's not just your first job, it's a lifetime of career success. So probably not completely surprising given that we're a business school, very pragmatic. But we also, as marketers, know that the brand is much more than a messaging or positioning statement or a new identity. It's about the people, the place, and increasingly the stories that you tell about yourself. In fact, I think it was the CMO at Virgin Atlantic said that the best brands are comprised of compelling stories. And so I think for us, what we really felt is we had to double down on that effort because we were missing some of the authentic stories that we wanted our audiences to know about us and to tell it in a way that I think is much more believable than traditional advertising. So we embarked on an effort to tell those stories. And one of the things that we realized is that we were telling stories about our students that weren't necessarily consistent with what we were hearing out in the media about recent college graduates. We were talking about students that were doing really interesting things. I can tell you about one in particular. Her name is Elisa, and she studied sustainability and economics, was part of our Fed Challenge team that goes and debates monetary policy against other college teams, and they're graded by a panel of monetary experts at the Fed. And she also took a number of classes and coursework here at Bentley, paired that with internships, and wound up being a research analyst at the Brookings Institute. So here's a story, one of many, of a very successful Bentley grad. Meanwhile, the media was painting a really different picture. So we see headlines or saw headlines all the time about millennials being broke, narcissistic, most likely living in their parents' basement. And we were trying to reconcile this with the picture we were seeing of our graduates. And what we came away with is that this tension or dichotomy really presented a very compelling storytelling opportunity for us. So we decided to run with that and build on this idea of creating a storytelling platform that we called PreparedU. And we really sought to position ourselves as an authority on preparing graduates for career and life success, not just because all the stories were going to be grounded or rooted in this is what we're doing at Bentley, but because we were going to be a convener of different voices and different thought leaders on this topic. So we've done this by bringing in to the conversation peers at other institutions, graduates of other institutions, and professionals, business professionals, and leaders from a range of organizations that can talk about what it means to onboard new employees, train them for success in the workplace, and what other schools have done to prepare their graduates that might look different from what we're doing here. But the idea was to kind of really firmly root this idea that Bentley is all about prepared. And for us, success, if we created content that was useful and helpful for somebody and they forwarded that along, maybe they determined Bentley wasn't the right school for them, but it stuck with them and they recommended Bentley to somebody else. That was still, in our minds, that was still, that was success. It was a win for us in that somebody associated us with the kind of values and the brand that we're looking to build. So to tell a story, I want to take a step back in terms of the storytelling piece and say that, make it clear that we rooted the stories and content we're creating in research, because we knew that for the media to pick this up and help us propagate these stories and the content, we need to be based in some market-driven research. And so we surveyed a number of audiences, some of the same ones I mentioned earlier. We're very keen on research here. And it was pretty exhaustive, as you can see, over 3,000 respondents and 300 questions. So we asked them questions like, what does preparedness mean to you? And we found some interesting dichotomies that we surfaced through papers and infographics like this one. We also asked business leaders and recruiters, as well as the parents of college grads and college grads themselves, are they prepared for the workforce? And we were able to share numbers like this, where you see that only 9% of recruiters give recent college grads an A on being prepared. That makes for some compelling content and headlines and takeaways. So we really leverage this in as many platforms and in formats as we could. And so here's an example, a page from one of our ebooks that we created. So how did we go to market with all this content? We conducted the research. Well, we created a lot of different formats, like I've mentioned, some white papers and ebooks. We wrote articles for our alumni magazine. We created shareable infographics and videos. We have a partnership with Bloomberg Radio, where once a month we have a live event hosted by our president. And we spoke about a lot of these findings and invited some key members of the business community as well as peer institutions to reflect on this and think about, so what are the solutions to bridging these gaps? And then we also look to extend this content and the research over 18 months by chunking it out into phases. We had so many interesting insights that we created 4 narratives out of this, and we phased them out over that time period. And so it was successful in terms of earned media. We got some amazing placements, saw really nice growth in our media impressions. And so for us, that was successful in and of its own right. But we knew that we could extend this idea further than just earned media and really put PreparedU at the center of our marketing ecosystem. And that sounds like quite an impressive buzzword, but it means no more than this idea of building your channels and platforms around this. So our efforts around paid media, our owned properties like our website, the social channels that we're on, our email newsletters, our magazine, making sure this content was propagated and distributed across all these channels, because what I've shared to date was really our efforts around earned media, but we knew we could do a lot more if we synced all of these channels together. So how do we extend PreparedU? Well, we took a lot of the same formats that I've mentioned, and on the paid side, we started syndicating content through channels like Taboola and Outbrain. I've mentioned Bloomberg Radio, which is a partnership. We did a lot to start amplifying this content on social, and that meant more than just posting, but also boosting this content and putting some paid dollars against it, and then also leveraging it in the channels we own. And we built a blog around this. Blog seems kind of like a flat, yeah, everybody's got a blog, not that impressive term, but if you go to Prepared, bentley.edu/prepared, you'll see that we have tagged all of our content against some of these key themes for workplace and preparedness, and that helps us port out that content to various sections of our site. So you'll see a stream of that content. Let's say if you're visiting our graduate site and looking at graduate programs, you might see content that's germane to that audience, as well as our undergrad site. So we try to really, you might have heard that phrase, cope, create once, publish everywhere. We really are mindful about that and are trying to leverage this in as many ways as possible. So I like to describe it as our evolution from pitching, which is a very media-centric kind of term and practice, to publishing, which is kind of new for higher ed marketing teams, right? We published dozens and dozens of blog posts over the last, I'd say we went from publishing probably 3 to 5 a week, no joke there. I'll talk to you a little bit more about our hacks and tips for doing that, but we went to, right now we're kind of publishing at a pace of 1 to 2 a week, and I'm trying to emphasize quality and enabling everything for, baking sharing enablement and social enablement into the content, which takes a little bit more time, but I'm really emphasizing quality over quantity. So we're probably now at more of a 1 a week cycle. Here's a sample of our newsletter that we send out to subscribers who subscribe on the Prepared blog I mentioned. And if you ask, has this had any impact? Because everyone wants to know, well, how is marketing influencing institutional KPIs? Well, on an undergraduate level, we survey students who enroll at Bentley, and 95% of them have said that career preparedness is a unique differentiator at Bentley, and that it helped influence their decision to enroll. So as far as, is this the right path for us? Should we continue with this message? We really feel that when we see stats like that, that absolutely this is resonating with our audiences and our target prospects. On our website, it's a good news, bad news story. On the good news side, we've had tremendous growth in year-over-year visits. So prior to launching our blog, our marketing team was publishing content into our newsroom, and it was, I guess I'd say it was more Bentley-specific content. It wasn't in this vein of helpful utility content geared to career preparedness. And so we saw a lift in both as we put paid dollars behind it and just the organic traffic that we've generated through some of this content. We saw a nice 6x year-over-year lift. 85% of the traffic from new users, so we're really pleased with those results. But we also saw some low conversion rates, meaning when we also had calls to action on blog pages asking people to sign up for our newsletter or downloaded an ebook that was gated content, we saw a pretty low conversion rate there. And 90% of that traffic, the traffic visiting our blog, was bouncing. I would attribute that to some of the amplification we were doing on channels like Taboola and Outbrain, which is, again, it's a pay-to-play placement. If we looked at the engagement rates, they vary. Organic traffic, more engaged, but we really wanted to, I wanted to share results and be truthful about this and say it's not all great. There was some good news, bad news here. So what we're doing is doubling down on the efforts that have worked and tapering back on some that where the traffic wasn't as engaged with our content. So inbound. I know you've all been told this was going to lead us to inbound, and we'll get into that part of the presentation now. When we thought about what we need to do to engage users with our content, inbound is a very content-centric practice, and we were doing a lot of the heavy lifting and hard work by creating all this content, but we weren't actually leveraging it in as useful a way as we could. And so I joke that inbound was kind of our path to enlightenment. We also, when we just want to impress or confuse colleagues around campus, we talk about paid, owned, earned, and inbound a lot, and people will just start rolling their eyes at us and saying, "All right, enough already. We know marketing is very complex today." But as we look at how we've had to change our approach to work, it's really been transformational for us as a team. So it's been all of the above, and I'll share some examples of what we did specifically before I hand it over to Jeff. So earlier this year, we piloted inbound in a very organic skunkworks approach with just a few people from the team, defining a persona, which is really the first step in adopting inbound. And we interviewed some subscribers to our newsletter, and we defined one of our key personas as Agency Anna. We really came to know her really well, what her pain points were with her career, the kinds of sites she used to navigate career issues and get insights for really growing in terms of her area of responsibilities, as well as just professional growth. And so we came to know her and really make sure that the content we were creating resonated with her. Those insights really helped inform this idea that we'd create an ebook tailored to Anna and all the people subscribing like her who are struggling with the same pain points in terms of how to achieve more career success. So we created an ebook tied to that, and we gated it, meaning we asked people to provide their name and email address to download it. It was about 18 pages, and it was a mix of content that we curated from our own site, so content we had published, grounded in the research that I described earlier, as well as content we curated from third parties. So it was a nice balance of Bentley-specific content and third-party content. And we also used it to capture leads or contacts for our graduate admissions programs. We had a opt-in box on that form that asked visitors if they were interested in learning more about how a graduate degree could enhance their career. We had a 25% opt-in rate. So we knew we were onto something. We promoted the ebook on several channels. We promoted it on our blog, but we found the most successful channel was paid social. So just promoting the ebook through Facebook and creating custom audiences was very successful and cost-effective for us. So when we compared our efforts around this inbound program that lasted about 8 weeks to the same number of contacts or leads we generated in that 8-week period year over year, we saw a 10x growth in the contacts we generated at just a fraction of the cost. We also were able to build on that prepared email subscriber list as well. So the denominator, I'm going to underscore that the denominator was very low in the case of some of these as far as email subscribers, let's say. But the fact that we could do this in a much more cost-effective way than what we were doing with paid advertising was really tremendous for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, who will talk about how, building on this, he was able to employ these practices for grad admissions campaigns. And we're just going to switch headphones here, so bear with us.
Thanks, Val. And if anyone does have questions, you're welcome to type those into the question box, and we will address those at the end.
So as I like to joke with Val, she had the easy part of this assignment, which isn't really true, but she did the kickoff to all this and kind of started on the road to inbound. And now it's passed over to me to try and find a way to turn these contacts into leads. So as I joke, anyone could get a few contacts, can generate some contacts with first name, last name, email. But the challenge with inbound is how do you nurture those relationships and make them become marketing qualified leads. So that was our challenge, and we decided to launch the program to try and generate interest in our MBA program. So we leveraged what Val had done with her Millennial Women campaign, and then we were really trying to use some paid channels to promote our content instead of Bentley-centric, what I call propaganda. Instead of saying how great we are, we're actually putting out content of value that people interested in our programs might be interested in learning about. And then we wanted to try some new techniques as well, things that might push us out of our comfort zone a little bit. I can talk about that in the future. So we went through the persona routine. I'm sure everyone at Converge last week heard all about the personas. It was MBA Kyle that one school had set up. We did MBA Andy, so I think only men get MBAs. So that's an interesting little factoid there. But I didn't really buy into personas at first because I thought I knew our target customer pretty well. But by doing the interviews and creating what we call buyer questions, what were the pain points that our different audiences had, we're able to really get inside their head and identify content that would be of value to them. So it really is a valuable process, and taking from someone who's a non-believer early on, I highly recommend going through the process to learn who your customers are. So what type of content did we produce? We wanted to produce content for all levels of the funnel. So at the awareness stage, when someone was just thinking about getting an MBA, we drafted articles about, is an MBA worth it, or how much does it cost to get an MBA? Those are the questions that people had when they were just thinking about it. And then when they moved down to the consideration set, where they know they're going to get their MBA, but they're not sure where, we wrote some articles about, when should you go to an open house, or what kind of career support the schools have, things like that. And then towards the very bottom of the funnel, when people are making a decision, we wrote blog posts about, should I go for an interview, or how can I meet up with current students, things like that. The point being that at each different point of the process, your customers are thinking about different things. So you really want to try and relate to them at each point of the process. And the thing about this effort that I would like to reiterate is it's not easy, especially with the content promotion. You need a lot of content, and that content needs to live someplace. So we created a blog for the graduate school called Masterminds. Little play on Master of Science programs and MBA, but that's where all our content lived, and we wrote content related to each program that we offer, as well as admissions. So there's a central repository for all the articles, and did all our keyword research to make sure we were hitting on the right terms that people are searching on, and then the content was related to wherever they were in the funnel. But you need to create some sort of repository for all this content to live. And then we also did the ebook route. So we created a few different ebooks. Our top of the funnel ebooks were the MBA's Guide to Workplace Success. That might look a little similar to the ebook that Val did about for millennial women. And I think that's something that is a key learning that we came across, is that you can really repurpose some of this content and design. It's a lot of work to create an ebook, 15 to 17 pages. And we had the design all figured out, but so we could just take some of the general concepts that we use for millennial women and adjust the content to be relevant for MBAs. So that was a quick win for us, and that ebook is done very well. And also 32 ways to tell if you're ready for your MBA. That's done very well for us as well. People were curious, when should I go back for my MBA? So that has resonated with a lot of people. And then a middle of the funnel ebook. So after someone gives us their first name, last name, email, we try and move them further down the funnel by enticing them with an ebook about the MBA application toolkit. So when someone's thinking about applying, what are the different tricks or tips they might need to complete the process? So one thing that I mentioned that we wanted to leverage what Val had learned, and we definitely realized that just promoting blog posts alone is kind of a long and tedious process. And we figured that if we could take our gated content, promote it in a variety of channels, then we'd do a better job driving leads. And that proved to be true as well. So by promoting the ebooks that I just talked about on places like Google and LinkedIn and Twitter, we were able to generate quite a few leads for the MBA program. Facebook was really the clear winner with this, though. The ability to really target customers for that platform proved to be very successful. And to this day, with all programs that we run, Facebook is very cost effective and drives great results. So I'd highly recommend looking at that. So when someone clicks on one of our ebook ads, they're going to go to a landing page where As Val mentioned, we use HubSpot, and we just have a simple form, first name, last name, email. And the benefit of this is we're reaching people much earlier in the buying process than if we were just promoting Bentley. We're reaching a lot of people who are just thinking, yeah, maybe I'm ready for my MBA, and last name, email at that point. That allows us to start contacting them much earlier in the process, as opposed to when they're down to the bottom of the funnel and they finally raise their hand and say, maybe I'm interested in Bentley. The benefit to this is that we can reach them much earlier, and that's where the whole nurturing process comes in. So the nurturing process, what does that look like? Once we have someone's first name, last name, email, we need to develop what we call workflows in HubSpot to make sure we're giving them relevant information. So here's an example of what our top of the funnel to middle of the funnel workflow looks like for MBA Andy. So once we have this information, then we send them an email. It comes from me because this is not a qualified lead yet, so you might as well have it come from me. But the email promotes this blog post that we wrote about important tips to help you ace the GMAT. And then a week later, there's another email about what an MBA will do for you. Really trying to get at those different pain points that we've heard from prospective students early on in the process. So I won't walk through all the emails, but one tip that I would highly recommend that proved very valuable with these emails is make sure they come from a person. So I mentioned they come from me, obviously. I think I'm a person, so that works well. But people actually respond to those emails. So it's amazing the responses I'll get from people saying, "Thank you for that article. That was very helpful." And honestly, it's an automated process. I didn't send it. HubSpot did. I don't tell them that, but we've learned a lot about people who just responded to me directly, and then I passed that information along to admissions, who is our sales team, and they have some great insight into what people are thinking based on what people tell me. So how do the email work? How do the emails in the workflow do? They perform very well. Open rate, here's an example of over 50%. I think any one of us marketers would take that for an email, and with a click-through rate of 30%. So plenty of people are open and engaging with the content. So clearly, we're giving them something of value, which is the best part of this entire process. Hey, and only 24 people told us to get lost. So 24 unsubscribes from that email. That's actually not too bad. So some of the results for the campaign, which just lasted about 3 months, we were able to generate almost 1,800 contacts, first name, last name, email. And then through the nurturing process, we're able to generate more than 200 leads that we passed off to admissions, what we call marketing qualified leads. So that's, if you think about the impact of one enrolled student for any of our organizations, the fact that we have 212 qualified leads that admissions can nurture is very valuable and very cost effective. So we've done a number of campaigns through the years through traditional channels, digital ads or print ads. We've done homepage takeovers on very popular sites, and if we got 5 to 7 first name, last name emails, it was relatively successful. To get 212 of this, we were very pleased with. The buying process for an MBA is quite a bit longer than it is to buy a traditional widget, so we don't have the updates on how many of those people have enrolled, but maybe at Converge next year we can talk about that. So hopefully admission is nurturing those people right now, and through the actual buying process, through their sales process, and hopefully several of them will turn into applications. And I wanted to include this. It was one of the quotes that I got back in my email directly from one of the blog posts that we sent out, and someone saying how valuable the 32 reasons to get your MBA ebook was, and how they really related to that, and they were wondering if we had any open houses in the New York area. So clearly someone who would not have found out about Bentley University had we not done this, and the ebook actually had a big impact on them. So Val can take us to the end and hit upon some of the different mistakes that we learned throughout the process.
Thanks, Jeff. So, lessons we learned or mistakes you don't want to make that we made for you. I think the first thing is that playbooks don't exist in this space. We went through or have gone through about 7 versions of different calendars. We've tried multiple different content production tools. We've talked to consultants and agencies that offered all sorts of different answers, but the bottom line is there's no silver bullet or no one right way to do this. So we finally agreed we can't let perfection be the enemy of good. We had to just jump in and start creating content. So if you don't get started, you will be last at this party because content marketing has really arrived. Interest in the topic of content marketing has grown 5x over the last 5 years, according to Google search trends. So I think the reality is if you as a brand don't jump in and start creating content on the issues and topics that are core to your institution, someone else will. This may sound obvious in terms of starting with the end in mind, but I think if you think about if you're interested in driving more visitors at the top of the funnel, or maybe you need to leverage inbound and content marketing to convert your visitors to leads and then customers, there's room for improvement at all stages of the funnel. And so for us, we really started publishing before having this conversation. We were creating all sorts of great content, but weren't really clear or directive about where this content was going to best support the user in terms of their path or journey. And we could have allocated resources and effort in a much more mindful way. So I would really encourage you to take a very user-centric approach to creating the content, thinking about the utility you're providing as they go through what can be a very long process for making a decision about a grad program or an undergrad program. Next, I'll just share that it's really important to amplify your content, and probably means putting some money behind it, because for us, it was like a tree falling into the forest until amplification kicked in. And I did share that not all of these channels were successful. We had some lots of one-and-done visits from Outbrand and Taboola and the channels or sources that were driving traffic from content syndication. But we did find that the traffic we were able to drive from paid social efforts paid off. These were visits that did engage more readily, did sign up for and or complete forms for downloading ebooks. So we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to see payoff when we've optimized blog posts for SEO. We have some evergreen pieces that continue to drive results from traffic or from posts that were published about a year ago. And they're in our top 5 in terms of traffic generation on a weekly basis. So those haven't been unseated by anything else we've done. So it really pays to think about SEO and bake that into your plans and into the content you produce. So some tips, ideas, and hacks as you move forward. I think, a lot of folks have asked, how do we make the case for content? I mean, it might not necessarily be a huge expenditure to create the content, but it's certainly going to be resource intensive. And, in our case, we outlined or made a business case by saying, look, we can become less dependent on paid media if we shift to an earned and owned approach. We created this model or outlined this as kind of our cause back in FY13, now 2 years ago. And I would probably shape the story or narrative a little differently if I were doing this today, because we haven't been able to supplant, and I don't think we will ever supplant paid with earned and owned entirely. We still need to put some money against the content we create in the form of paid media. And when I just talk about things like there's no such thing as organic social anymore, you really do need to boost all your content that you share on these channels through some paid advertising, and use that as a springboard to driving more in the organic form. But this is definitely one way to make a case. And for each organization, it's going to be different, right? So I think it's important to justify putting resources against this, and do it on a small scale at first. So the justification or the number you're looking at is smaller. it's really important to build your email list because on a long-term basis, this is going to be one of the most valuable assets you have to propagating your content and your stories out there. So for us, that means in every way possible, we highlight the ability or encourage people to sign up and stay in touch with us through the newsletter. We'll get content. So if you want to download something, you've got to tell us a little bit about yourself. So we're always looking for ways to really insert those email call to actions in our content. We also started thinking differently, and I'd encourage you, instead of looking at what other institutions are doing in your competitive space, when you think like a publisher and start creating content, you've got to look at the zeitgeist of what's getting created and shared on the topics your audience cares about. So if you're looking for, look for the trends, find out who the influential content creators are, and who's creating the content that's getting shared the most, and looking at what's unique about that content, maybe reverse engineering it and saying, okay, so, it's, for us, we've been looking at topics on millennials and jobs and careers. And so when we looked about what was getting shared, we were able to either jump on the bandwagon and create similar kinds of content, or you can find a point of differentiation and look for white space or gaps and stories that maybe haven't been told where you and your brand can have a point of view. So I think BuzzSumo is a great tool. We use it a lot. It's a tool, and I believe that there's a free version, but it's a very inexpensive tool. I think we're on the $49 a month plan, but you're able to search for content by keyword phrases and look at what's been created in terms of it rank or it delivers the results in terms of social shares instead of kind of like a relevancy result listing. It shares results in terms of social shares. So you're always able to look at what's gotten the most traction from a social perspective. And I think that's really meaningful when you're thinking, how can I get my audience to share this content, propagate it for me? So I said earlier that creating content might not be something that costs a lot in terms of, paying to do this, but it's resource intensive. And if you don't have resources on your team who are readily available to write, I think it's really logical to think about tapping into refugees from news outlets and media outlets, because lots of organizations aren't able to support the staff they were 5 or 10 years ago. So we've been able to tap some people who used to write for the Globe, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and pay them on a per blog basis to create some great content for us. And so some of the best, most productive content in terms of organic traffic and visits and shares has been created by people who have never worked at Bentley. And I don't think that's airing any dirty laundry. I think most organizations today have a very kind of distributed content creation model. There are also some organizations like Converge that can help you with that too. I also like to talk about hiring people for mindset match, and this is twofold. The first slide is just thinking about marketing today as one part artistry and one part science. So finding people that can tap into the unique narratives that are going to compel people to share content and pull together both the written word and some of the visual assets that you need to tell that story in a compelling way, but then also have the mindset of a metrics orientation where they're going to be able to monitor performance and report back to the team on what's working and what's not and why. So you want to have both of those skill sets or all of those skill sets in some of the people that you look to hire moving forward. And I think it's absolutely critical that we hire people that love to learn. Marketing, more than any other function outside of IT, has changed more in the last 5 years than any other function in business. And it's kind of ironic that we work in higher ed and have to encourage people to keep learning, but learning is critical in a digital landscape that's changing and at the pace that it is. So these are some of the tools that we've adopted just in the last 18 months. And it's critical that our staff excited and enthusiastic about learning. So I really encourage you to find folks that are going to embrace some of the new tools and practices out there. So our last slide is just a word of encouragement. I think a lot of colleagues and folks I've shared this with, assume that we went from A to B overnight and that it wasn't messy and it wasn't uncomfortable at times, but it absolutely was. Success has, it's a journey that takes you on a lot of dead ends and circular routes. But for us, the twists and turns along the way are what you have to enjoy in the moment. So I think we've had to strap ourselves in, enjoy the ride, and we're still in there in the thick of things. And I'd say just encourage you to think that way as you embark on your inbound and content marketing efforts. So with that, just to thank you to Converge and for all of you for staying tuned in, and happy to take questions.
Yeah, Val, this is Anna, and we have a number of questions. The Bentley story is really one that's, I think, encouraging because you used a lot of great tools, a lot of great strategy, and really showed how you bring inbound marketing to life. So the first question, for institutions who are short funds and staffing limited, what suggestions do you have on where to focus? A big question.
Yeah, I would focus on, you can do a lot of audience and persona creation for very short money. If you've got an email subscriber list, I think we spent by sending out a survey and or jumping on the phone and doing phone interviews and listening to our audience, that can really help you hone in on kind of a quality versus quantity debate, so that you're not you're not on the hook for creating a ton of content. Set the pace for yourself based on what you think is going to provide the most utility for your audience, but it starts with knowing your audience. And so it's not expensive to survey and or call and speak to your audience, create the persona in-house. There's some great tools available, I'm sure, through Converge as well as HubSpot on what persona templates, starting points for persona templates. And I think starting with an audience-centric approach to content is going to help you really hone in on, what 4, 5, 6 pieces of content are going to be most meaningful. And start with that before you try to boil the ocean.
Absolutely, Val. I think that's a really great point. I think that really aligning your goals as an institution along with those things that your key audiences are interested in is a great approach. And I definitely think that those personas that both you showed and that we've talked about, I think are really helpful to having a very clear starting point. The next question, did you or do you gate your website or certain pages on your website? So maybe you can talk about what gated content looks like.
Sure. Great question. So we do gate some content, which means that we put that content behind a form that requests a name and email address. So some of our premium content is gated. So we've got ebooks that we gate. So we ask people to provide a name and email address before we let them download that ebook. And we do that to build our email list. So the Millennial Woman ebook that we created for Agency Anna was a piece of gated content. And we found that that's been one of the best tools in our arsenal for capturing names and email and getting, creating that, flywheel for inbound, so you can then remarket and go back to these people and nurture them as leads.
Excellent. Great point. In your content emails, would you suggest anchoring around one piece of content or a couple or several? In other words, would you say a more newsletter-ish monthly email with a couple pieces of content, or a more frequent, like one time a week email with one piece of content works better?
So here's where I might give an answer that sounds like a non-answer, but I'd recommend that you test it. We arrived at our format for our newsletter after doing tests, and I would say they were more directional. The results were more directional in nature. We don't have a sizable enough database, or we didn't have a sizable enough database at the time where we would net out at a very statistically significant result where we said, okay, this frequency and this number, but we just look at the engagement rates when we highlighted one piece of content where we really made that piece of content the hero in a piece versus when we served up three in kind of the treatment we do today where we treat them all with the same kind of weighting. So that worked for us, but it may be different for your audience. I'd encourage you to try a couple of different formats, and don't, depending on the size of your audience, you may or may not be able to generate real valid, I guess, quote unquote valid results. But if it's directional and you get some kind of similar responses after trying a few times, I would say go with it.
Excellent. Good. Another question: how long did it take from start to launching phase one?
Well, so for us, we did a lot of talking. I think if you recall one of my slides, I said just get started because we did a lot of planning and felt like we needed kind of this overarching content strategy that would have to be, a X-page document. We really, I would say from when we really got her start, and we're doing this in a more directive kind of informed way, was when we started interviewing subscribers and crafting the persona. And that took us, I'd say, 6 weeks to get through that persona creation phase. And from there, creating the first kind of batch of content. So we had maybe like 10 pieces at the top of the funnel and a piece that premium content in the middle of the funnel that we gated. That took us an additional 2 months. So I think all in 3 to 4 months to create that first package of content that we oriented for Agency Anna.
Good. And then another question, how are you measuring the effectiveness outside of kind of the year-over-year growth of the project? Are there other key variables you're looking at?
Yeah, sure. So as far as kind of a top-line KPI, so of course it depends on the audience. When we meet and present, when I present to the president and the board, very interested in year-over-year media mentions. Is the Prepared project creating more awareness for Bentley as a brand? So the media impressions are a very valuable metric to share there. When I'm speaking to my colleagues in admission, and we have evidence that 95% of enrolled students say that career preparedness was a differentiator and was a reason they enrolled at Bentley. Those are kind of some of the stats we share. And then we also like to share with graduate admissions, because the personas we created in the inbound methodology we're applying is specifically for creating grad contacts and leads that we hand off to admissions. We share with them on a monthly basis a dashboard that says, here are the sources of advertising, everything from paid search to paid social. And here are the amount of contacts we created and generated in HubSpot. Here are the amount that converted from contacts to leads. And by program, and here's how many we shipped over to your shop in admissions. So we get to a much more granular level when you're looking at inbound as a practice, as opposed to kind of some of the earned metrics that I share on the earned media side with the president and board.
Excellent. Great. Well, I think that's it for questions. Val, thank you so much for your time today, and Jeff for your time. If there are any other questions, please do tweet at us or send us an email. We'd love to answer those. The slides will be made available as well as the recording. And a kudos to our friends at Bentley for the fantastic job that they've done in really making a successful inbound marketing strategy come to life through a lot of hard work. Thanks, Val. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great day.